Hello friends, good evening. Welcome to Mission Possible by BK. This is Bharat, Chartered Accountant by profession, and we will continue with the next lessons in your accounting module. So in our earlier video, we discussed about trial balance and rectification of errors. How do we rectify the errors and what is the concept that we use while rectifying one-sided errors, which is called as suspense account. And we discussed about two-sided errors, and we also discussed about the various types of errors that generally occur. So now in this chapter we will be discussing about capital and revenue expenditure. I had already given you a small brief in my earlier videos. In this video we will go into the depth of it. So what is an expenditure? In general terms, expenditure is nothing but something which you spend for, isn't it? If I spend 10 rupees to purchase a biscuit or something of eatable, then that is an expense. Anything which causes money to flow away from your pocket is nothing but an expenditure. So now in business terms, generally the word expense and the word expenditure both are used interchangeably. That means both are one and the same, but generally expenses are considered of a smaller nature, like what you generally incur for rent or salary or insurance, electricity bill. All these are generally categorized as expenses, whereas expenditure denotes something bigger. Again, in expenditure there are two types of different classes. One is called as the capital expenditures and one is called as your revenue expenditures. So expense and expenditure are one and the same, nothing to get confused. In business generally they use expenses, sometimes they use expenditure, and in both of this there are two categories. One is your capital expenses, another one is your revenue expenses. Okay. So capital expenses, the name itself suggests these expenditures are incurred for high value items that hold a longer duration requirement. That means these expenditure are incurred when you purchase something, the benefit of which lasts for more than 1 year. What is the example which I have given in my earlier video? Simple purchase of a plant and machinery. Why is it called a capital expenditure? That also I explained to you. I will once again explain that to you now. So we discussed this. There are two things, one is something called as your revenue expenditure. There is something called as capital expenditure. Capital expenditure, the basic nature of capital expenditure. How do you distinguish between whether an expense is a revenue or a capital? The first criteria is your amount, friends. For example, I purchased a plant and machinery for production and the value of it is 10 lakh rupees. Okay. Now first thing that comes to your mind should be the basic accounting logic. So if you are purchasing a plant and machinery, is it for a period of 1 year? Does that mean that the benefit out of this plant and machinery, are you going to get it for 1 year or more than 1 year? Obviously, if you purchase a plant and machinery, the basic objective is to arrive some benefits out of that plant for a period of more than 1 year, isn't it? That's why you purchase a plant. That's why you make an investment, because you want the benefits for a longer period of time. So this is the first concept that should come into your mind, whether an expense is a capital expense or a revenue expense. So capital expense means all those expenditures wherein the benefit of those expenditures will accrue to you for a period of greater than 1 year in general. That is your basic accounting logic that should come to your mind when you classify a revenue expenditure and a capital expenditure. The second thing that should come to your mind is the quantity of the amount. So size of this amount is obviously not small, isn't it? So when you incur this much for a particular expenditure, it is definitely going to be a larger expenditure. So in general, all the larger expenditures are generally considered as capital expenditures, provided the benefit of it accrues to you for more than 1 year. Just because an expense is huge amount, you cannot call it as capital expenses. For example, my director in the company is a highly qualified person. He is an IIT guy, IIM guy. He did a lot of qualified courses and his salary is almost 1 crore per annum. Now, can you call this as a capital expenditure? No, you cannot call this as a capital expenditure because this 1 crore per annum, the salary you are paying is only for 1 year, isn't it? You are not paying salary to him for the next 10 years, isn't it? So every year you are going to pay him salary. So every year, whatever the expenses incur, it will come to your profit and loss as a revenue expenditure because it is not a capital expenditure. The benefit is not going to accrue to you for a period of more than 1 year because you are paying him salary on a monthly basis. If he works for June, you are going to pay him salary for June, isn't it? You are not going to pay him salary for July, August and other months. So that's why these expenses are generally limited. The benefit of it accrues to you only for a shorter period of time, 1 month period of time or the maximum 1 year period of time. That's why you have to classify the expenditures based upon the benefit it gives to you. So capital expenditure benefits accrue to you for a period of more than 1 year, and at the same time the amount you spend for those expenditures are in general huge. Okay. So if you can see here, the expenditures are high value items and the example is purchasing of plant and machinery, etc. These are all your capital expenditure. And then revenue expenditure. Revenue expenditure are not for high value items. Instead, they are the routine expenditure that takes place. Routine expenditures, any expenditure other than capital. That means for your salaries, for your telephone expenses, for your electricity. These are all for your routine expenditures, and the assets get consumed in an accounting year and no future benefits are available. This is the most important point. Future benefits are not available. All the revenue expenditure, the benefit you get is limited to only 1 year period of time or even lesser than that. That's why these are classified as revenue expenditures. And also the second logic I will tell you why you cannot classify a capital as revenue. Because there is something called as, when we studied the accounting concepts, there is something called as the financial year concept, isn't it? So we have to maintain the accounting records for 1 year period of time, that is for 12 months period of time. Now a question may come to you. So we have purchased this, and also there is something called as matching concept. That means your income, we have also learned that your income and your expense should be matching. That means if your income is for 1 year period of time, your expenses also should be for 1 year period of time. You cannot say if the income is for 1 year and expense is for 10 years. So that's why if you purchase a plant and machinery and the useful life of the plant and machinery is, for example, 10 years, that means you can use the plant and machinery for 10 years. If you put the 10 lakhs in expense, does it satisfy your concept of matching? No, we have learned something called as matching, isn't it? If you go back to our previous videos, you can know that this is also one of the concepts in accounting, matching concept. That means your income and expenses in general should be matching. Your income should belong to that year and expenses also should belong to that year only. So if you incur a plant and machinery of 10 lakhs and the benefit comes to you for 10 years, is it the correct method to show 10 lakhs in 1 year period of P&L? No, that is absolutely not correct because the concept does not satisfy your matching related issues. So that's why what you have to do is you have to show this as an asset, and then each and every year you allocate this cost to your P&L based upon the useful life. Now in this case, what happens is 10 lakhs is the cost of machinery, and if you say that the useful life is 10 years, then 10 lakhs divided by 10. So 1 lakh every year, 1 lakh per annum, I charge an expense by the term called as depreciation. So every year I show 1 lakh in your P&L. So that year's expense only I am showing, correct? So does this satisfy your matching concept? Yes, absolutely it satisfies your matching concept. That's why assets generally have something called as useful life, and we allocate the cost of this asset over the useful life of this asset by debiting an expense called as depreciation in your P&L account. Every year we keep debiting 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh, and after 10 years your asset value will become 0, and each and every year your P&L will have an expense of 1 lakh. That means the total cost has been allocated to your P&L over a period of time, which satisfies your concept of matching. And also, as it is a capital expenditure, it has to be shown on the asset side. Every year you show 10 lakhs. So obviously the asset balance also gets reduced. That means initially when you purchase an asset, it will have 10 lakh. So first year depreciation 1 lakh. Next year if you see the asset balance will be only 9 lakh. Again second year. So this is the first year. Second year again you will deduct 1 lakh, isn't it? So second year ending your asset balance will be 8 lakh. So what is the entry that you pass for this? Simple concept of logic which I told to you. Depreciation is an expense or an income? It is an expense. Expense comes under P&L or balance sheet? P&L. Expense in P&L is debit balance or credit balance? Debit balance. So depreciation debit 1 lakh only for that year. 2. Which balance have to be reduced in the fixed asset? In the asset category, the fixed asset, isn't it? Only if you reduce the fixed asset balance, then over a period of 10 years, this asset balance in your balance sheet will become 0, isn't it? So you have to credit your fixed asset. Credit your fixed asset. In general, assets have debit balance. If you purchase something, it will be added on. But if at all you are selling something or if you are charging depreciation, it will reduce. So you will credit fixed asset 1 lakh. So that 1 lakh comes under your asset as negative balance, and at the year end you will show only 9 lakhs as your asset value. Next year again you will pass the same entry. Again in P&L 1 lakh will be shown as expense and your asset balance will be decreased by another 1 lakh. So this continues for a period of 10 years. After 10 years, this balance in your asset debit side will become 0 because every year you are reducing 1 lakh, 1 lakh, 1 lakh. So after 10 years, this becomes 0. That means the asset has been completely used. And at the same time, every year in the last 10 years, you would have been showing an expense of 1 lakh in your P&L account, which is satisfying your concept of matching. That means the cost for that year has been properly allocated. So that is what your concept of matching also says. Hope you understood the entire flow of this transaction now. They have given the differences between capital and revenue. Amount spent is huge, amount is small. The benefit is for improving business productivity or earning, which is obviously more than 1 year. The benefit is for short duration. The benefit is for long duration. It is non-recurring, it is recurring. That means generally for fixed assets, it is non-recurring because we don't spend often. Every day you can't purchase a plant, isn't it? So that's why it is said as non-recurring, whereas revenue expenses are recurring. Rent you have to pay every month, salary you have to pay every month. And this is shown in balance sheet. Just now what I have told you, if you purchase an asset, which is a capital expenditure, it is shown in the balance sheet, and every year proportionately you are going to charge depreciation in your P&L, and also you are going to reduce your fixed asset by that amount. So over the period of that useful life, the asset value becomes 0 in your balance sheet, and your P&L, the cost is also allocated every year. Instead of full amount in 1 year, every year the cost is allocated. So it is shown in profit and loss account, not matched with capital receipts, matched with revenue receipts. Capital receipts are something which is different. Revenue receipts are something which is different, which we will learn in the next few slides. So just like what we have seen expenses, there is something called as receipt. Again in receipt, there is something called as revenue receipt, and there is something called as your capital receipts. Revenue receipts, first we will start. It is nothing but the revenue earned from your day-to-day operations of the company, which are routed through profit and loss account. That means you sell some goods, okay? You sell some goods. So what do you get? You get an income. Sales is an income. So income is shown in profit and loss or balance sheet. Profit and loss. Income is on the debit side or credit side? Credit side. Income is on credit side. Expenses are on debit side. So the day-to-day income from your sales or production generally come under your revenue receipts. Anything apart from that come under your capital receipts. What are the example? Receipts from issue of equity. That means generally when a company is going for an equity issue, generally company have this habit of going for an initial public offering of equity, preference share, debentures. So when they collect this amount, it is going to be huge, isn't it? And they are raising this for the capital of the company. They are not raising this. This is not an income for the company. They are raising it as part of a capital of the company, isn't it? When you raise an equity, it becomes a liability because one or the other day you are going to pay it. It is not an income. It is not something which has been generated from your day-to-day operations of the company. It is something which you have taken an obligation. You are giving shares to the public, and the public are subscribing that shares and you are getting that money. So it is forming part of your capital. If you look at the balance sheet, in capital there will be three different types of capital. One is your equity capital, one is your preference share, another is your debentures. All these three are called as capital receipts because they form part of the capital of your company, and it is a liability. You have to repay it back. It is not an income. Okay. And similarly, if you sell off a fixed asset, just like when you purchase a fixed asset, you are recording it as a capital expenditure. Similarly, when you sell a fixed asset, obviously it will be a capital receipt. Just the opposite, because it is not from your regular source of production. It is something which is apart from that, and also the amounts are generally huge. So it is recorded as a capital receipt. Any long-term investment grant received, sometimes government gives you grant. If you set up an industry in a remote places like Assam, Guwahati or something like that, then the government gives you incentives or grants. Such types of grants are called as capital receipts because they give you a bulk amount wherein you have to satisfy some conditions, and this is not an income, and also it cannot be treated as an income because they give you a grant for a particular period of time. It may be 5 years period of time, 10 years period of time. That also becomes part of your balance sheet and not your profit and loss account, because these grants are generally given for maybe purchasing a fixed asset or setting up of the company. It can be of different types. So all these come under your category of capital receipts, wherein the amount is huge and also they are recorded on the balance sheet and not on the profit and loss. So this was all about your capital expenditure, revenue expenditure, capital receipts and revenue receipts. So this was a small topic, and now then we will move on to the other topic, which is all about your bills of exchange, and you will have a lot of concepts related to promissory notes, bills of exchange, letters of credit. This topic we will be covering this in even your other topics like law and regulatory and principles and practices of banking. This topic we will try to cover it in that subject as well, but for here I will just explain you the total gist of what is bill of exchange, what is a promissory note, and what is a letter of credit in very simple terms by using my whiteboard. So that will make the things more clear for you while discussing the same topic in other subjects. So you can just refer to this video. So bills of exchange. So why do we need bills of exchange? What is bills of exchange is something that we need to first know. In business transactions, what happens is credit is a common mode of payment. That means when we purchase something, we generally ask the seller to provide us some credit time. That means we will say that we will pay the amount after 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. If the relation between the buyer and seller is good and they have mutual trust, then there is no need of any written document. But in general, when we deal with a lot of new customers or new suppliers, and because we need to survive in our business, we have to offer credit. So the best alternative in those circumstances is to take help of instruments called as bills of exchange. The name itself suggests that it is a bill which is exchanged between two parties, and this bill has a monetary purpose. So what are these bills of exchange, and exactly what is the modus operandi, or how does a bill of exchange work, is something which I will explain to you with the help of a small flowchart. So just remember one thing, friends. In business, what happens? So there is a person called as A. Okay, he is a buyer. Okay, and there is a person who is a seller, B. So B sells some goods to A. So A has to pay money to B, but A says that I need a credit period of 90 days because I do not have any money to pay you now. If you want to sell the goods, then I am ready to take it on credit. Now B says that yes, I will offer you a 90 days credit, but in lieu of the credit, I want a bill of exchange to to be accepted by you, stating that you will pay the amount after 90 days. Now, when such a bill of exchange gets drafted and accepted between both the parties, it can be used as a legal mode of defense. That means if after 90 days A does not pay the amount, then B can approach the court with the help of that bill of exchange and claim that money. So that is the reason in general business parlance people enter into bill of exchange to safeguard their legal position in terms of getting the money. Now in this case, because A has asked credit, what happens? The seller now will draft a bill of exchange. The seller will draft a bill of exchange with a 90 days credit terms, okay, and A will have to accept that. So B is the creditor here, isn't it? B is the creditor here. That means to whom the money has to be paid, because he is lending the money. So one who lends the money is a creditor and one who owes the money is a debtor. So B is a debtor. Debtor means one who owes the money. That means one who has to pay the money. Creditor means one who gives the money or one who lends the money. So in Bill of Exchange Negotiable Instruments Act, the person who is lending such a benefit or the person who is lending that money is called as the drawer, because he is the one who is drawing this bill of exchange. He is the one who is drawing this bill of exchange, and the person who accepts that bill of exchange is called as drawee. So this is what a bill of exchange transaction in general. So B draws a bill of exchange on A and A has to accept it. So acceptance is must in a bill of exchange. If the bill of exchange is not accepted, you cannot go to a court and claim your money. So in general, when B gives a bill of exchange to A generally endorses or writes as accepted and sends it back to B. Now what happens is B, instead of waiting for 90 days, so this is basically the concept of a bill of exchange, friends. Okay. Now I will just tell you another case where there is something called as discounting the bill of exchange. In discounting bill of exchange, what happens is B needs money urgently, but he will get the money after 90 days only. So what he can do? What he can do now? He can endorse this bill of exchange to a bank. Bank will be the party who will be taking this bill of exchange. So when this bill of exchange is endorsed to the bank, bank will give B some money. So now assuming that the bill of exchange value is 1 lakh and this bill of exchange is endorsed to the bank, then the bank will give that money to B but not 1 lakh. It will deduct some charges. What are those charges? Generally interest. For example, 90 days, that means for 90 days, whatever is the interest applicable according to the bank rules, maybe 8% or 10%, it will deduct from this amount and pay to it. That means 1 lakh into 10% into 90 by 365. This calculation they will make and deduct this amount and give it to B. Assuming that this amount is 10,000, now bank will pay to B 90k. So why this deduction? This deduction is because bank is taking a hit for that 90 days, isn't it? Bank is giving the money to B immediately, whereas bank, how will it get its money back? Now after 90 days or any time before that, bank can give this bill of exchange to A. It will show the bill of exchange to A and A has to pay the money to the bank. A will pay the money to the bank. A will pay how much? 1 lakh to the bank, because A's liability is 1 lakh and now banks get some benefit in terms of this, because it is getting 1 lakh from A whereas it is only paying 90k to the B. So it makes some revenue in terms of discounting of bills of exchange. So this is called as discounting the bills of exchange. That means when a person is in need of money immediately, he can submit that bill of exchange to the bank and get the money immediately by paying some interest charges. So this is called as discounting bill of exchange. This is a common thing which every creditor does in your business circumstances because of the time value of money. That means 1 lakh after 3 months is equal to 90,000 today. So this time value of money is important. That's why they generally discount these bills of exchange with the bank immediately and get the money. So this is the concept of bill of exchange, and this also the concept of discounting the bills of exchange. Okay. So bank may have different conditions. That means it should be a fixed maturity date bill of exchange. That means it cannot be open-ended. It should be either 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and the bill of exchange should have been accepted by A, and the bill of exchange should be from reputed individuals or reputed companies. For each and every small person, they will not do this endorsement because their money is also important. What if A doesn't pay to him? Then again they have to go to the court and they have to take a lot of trouble in getting that money. So banks generally accept discounting only in those cases where the trustworthy of the party is good. Hope you understood this concept clearly. So this is all about bills of exchange. Now we will just quickly check some points related to bill of exchange. Drawer is the person who draws the bill. That means the creditor. And drawee is the person who accepts that. That means the debtor, the person who has to pay the money. Payee is the person who is going to receive the money. Just like what I have told you, in some circumstances, they endorse the bill of exchange to bank. Now, bank is the person who is going to receive the money. So, he is called as the payee. So, in a bill of exchange, there can be 2 parties or there can be even 3 parties. That means you can endorse that bill of exchange to some other party. So, some of the features of bill of exchange are, it should be in writing, it should be signed by the drawer, and it should have an unconditional order to a person. It should be unconditional. That means there should not be any conditions like I will pay to you after 90 days if it rains on that day. So these kind of conditions should not be there. It should be an unconditional order, and this amount should be specified properly, and the date should be specified properly, and it should be in a legal currency of the country. It should be stamped and it should be having a revenue stamp. These are the features which make it legally claimable. So that's why these are generally notable facts. And a simple example, Mr. Abhinav draws a bill on Alpha for 50,000, 3 months payable to Neeraj Kumar. In this, what he says that Abhinav draws the bill. That means Abhinav is the creditor here. Alpha is the one debtor. He has to pay the money. But Abhinav tells that you don't need to pay me. You pay to Neeraj Kumar. So in this case, Abhinav is the one who is the drawer. Alpha Jha is the one drawee. And Neeraj Kumar is the payee. What we have seen here, payee is the third person who is going to receive. Once Alpha receives this bill of exchange, he has to accept it. Generally, he writes accepted across that bill of exchange so that it indicates that he has accepted it. So this is what your bill of exchange is. Now next, coming to the concept of promissory note, a written undertaking by the buyer to make a payment on a specified date, either in the form of a bill of exchange or a promissory note. What we have seen earlier is that a bill of exchange is drawn by the creditor and accepted by the debtor, whereas the only main difference between a promissory note is written by the debtor promising the creditor. That means in this case, the debtor himself writes a promissory note stating that he has to pay a specific sum of money to this creditor and he promises to pay that money after a particular period of time. So that is the main differentiating feature between a promissory note and a bill of exchange. So this is the scenario of a bill of exchange. As we have seen that the only difference between a promissory note and a bill of exchange is the person who draws it. In this case, the creditor, that means the person who is lending the money prepares a bill of exchange, whereas in your promissory note it is just the opposite. That means the debtor, so I will just write it here itself so that you can identify the distinction. In a promissory note, what happens is that the debtor means one who owes the money. So the debtor prepares a promissory note and sends it to creditor. That means one who lends the money or one who sells the goods, saying that he has to pay 1,000 rupees and he will pay this money after 30 days, and it will have a stamp, and it will have a revenue stamp, and it will have the sign of the person who is preparing this promissory note. So some of the important features which you should note regarding a promissory note, that this is also defined in your Negotiable Instruments Act 1881, and a promissory note is generally an instrument in writing. It should be in writing, and it contains an unconditional undertaking. Again, it should not have any conditions, and it contains a promise that a particular sum of money will be paid in so many days, either to the person who is lending that money or to the bearer. That means if this promissory notes is endorsed by creditor to someone else called as X, then this debtor has to pay the money to X. So whomsoever has this promissory note properly endorsed by the creditor, he has the right to receive that money. Okay, so in this, drawer is nothing but the debtor. Okay, drawer is the debtor and drawee is the creditor. So it is just the opposite of your bills of exchange. So that is what you need to remember. So now we will just cover some questions regarding what comes under your promissory note. There are some requirements for a promissory note which we should satisfy. So what are those requirements? We will just see here. So it should be written, it should have an express undertaking, it should be unconditional, it should have a specific amount, it should have a legal tender. That means in a proper currency. Then only it will be considered as a promissory note. So I'll just give you a few examples. Just tell me whether it is a promissory note or not. So I am just trying to take this up and I will just write it here. So the first example which I want to give is a simple example. I promise to pay B 50,000 rupees on 31st July. Okay. So is this a promissory note? Yes, because it has a proper amount, proper currency, proper date, proper promise. So this is a promissory note. So now if I write I promise to pay B 30,000 rupees 7 days after my marriage with X. Now is this a promissory note? It has a promise, good. It has an amount, good. It has a currency, good. But it does not mention the date. It says that 7 days after my marriage with X. So this is conditional, isn't it? This marriage can happen or cannot happen. Who knows? Everything is uncertain. So this is conditional. So if a promissory note has such conditions, then it cannot be considered as a promissory note. You should understand these facts here, because sometimes they can ask you an MCQ in this fashion also. If you don't pay attention to these minor aspects of this definition, then you may end up giving the wrong answer. Both bills of exchange as well as your promissory notes should not be conditional, and you should understand that and keep that in your mind. Okay, so that is what your general definition about promissory note and the conditions are. There are many such, for example, you can even consider that I promise to pay 50,000 to B on D's death. Is this a promissory note? No, this is again conditional. Any conditional statements cannot be considered as a promissory note. So that is what the important thing which you should keep in mind. Okay, so that is all about your promissory note. Now just we will move to your promissory note. In general looks like this. It will be on a stamp paper. Revenue stamp will be there. term, months, date, promise will be there, amount will be there, date will be there, maker, address of the maker, everything will be given. Here acceptance is not required because the debtor himself says that I am going to pay the money. So there is no need of any acceptance. So the difference between promissory note and exchange, it is unconditional. Order, it is an unconditional promise. It is an order because it is prepared by the creditor. It is made by the creditor, whereas this is made by the debtor. Acceptance is mandatory, no acceptance is required. On dishonor of a bill, it is usually noted by the notary public. Nothing is necessary in terms of notary. So dishonor of a bill can happen when the other person doesn't pay. In such cases, you have to get it notified from the notary public, and then only you can go ahead with your legal case. And then next, check is something which all you people must be very well knowing because you're working in bank, and check is something which you see on a daily basis. Check must fulfill all the essential elements of a bill of exchange. That means it should have a name, it should have an amount, it should have a date. It should be payable to bearer or to someone else. That means your crossed check or uncrossed check. That happens when you generally deal with checks. The banker pays it when it is presented for payment. So whomsoever bank's check you are giving, that bank presents the payment. The signature must tally, check must be dated. So these are the basic features of check, and these are very easy to remember because you are probably working in bank and it must be easy for you to understand. Okay. So bills of exchange and check. The main difference is bill of exchange can be drawn upon any person including a bank, whereas check can be drawn only upon a bank. It cannot be drawn on an individual person. Only banks can be authorized to issue checks. Bill of exchange requires acceptance. Check does not require acceptance. I can simply write a check and I can simply write your name and give it to you. You can go to the bank, present the check and get the money. There is no need of any acceptance as long as the signature in the check matches with my signature. The acceptor of the bill of exchange is allowed 3 days of grace. In generally, grace period is allowed in case of bills of exchange, but in check, no such grace periods are allowed. If the maximum date is 30, then it has to be cleared 30 or anytime before 30. And check is always payable on demand. That means you cannot postpone it or prepone it. We can go to the bank anytime within the due date. Okay. Notice of dishonor is necessary. Notice does not require any stamp. As soon as the check is dishonored, the information goes to the account holder. And a bill of exchange must be stamped. Check does not require any stamp. It is a simple instrument, whereas bill of exchange is something which comes under your Negotiable Instruments Act complaints aspect. That means the complaints for a bill of exchange is quite more than your check. Even check also comes under Negotiable Instrument Act. Promissory note also comes under your Negotiable Instruments Act. So accommodation bills are nothing but same kind of bills of exchange, but here instead of a trade relation, it is just made in terms of a friendship relation. That means a friend requires a money and he doesn't have the money, so he goes to some other friend and asks him to lend the money. So they both draw a bill of exchange, and the person who has the bill of exchange goes to the bank immediately, discounts the bill of exchange and gets the money, and at the due date the friend pays to the bank and he gets the money from the person who has actually claimed it. I will explain you again with this help of an example so that it becomes easy for you to understand. In accommodating bill of exchange, what happens is there can be two scenarios. In one scenario, A, a friend, B is a friend. Okay. So A, B are two parties. So B draws a bill of exchange on A stating that he has to pay. B draws a bill of exchange on A stating that he has to pay 50,000. A accepts it. Okay. Immediately, both are friends. Okay. Both are friends. There is no trade relation here. Both are friends. Immediately B takes this bill of exchange to the bank and gets the money. He gets the money. So instead of 50,000, he gets 48,000 or something, assuming that there are some discounting charges. So this is for a period of 90 days. So after 90 days, bank asks A to give this money. So within this 90 days, what happens is B gets some money and B pays money to A. B pays 50,000 to A and A pays money to the bank after 90 days. After 90 days. So this is something which is a friendly relation. There is no trade relation here. So this accommodating bill can be of another type. That means A, B both require money. So what happens? A draws a bill of exchange on B. B draws a bill of exchange on A. Okay. A will have his bank. B will have his bank. Isn't it? B will have his bank. So both of them get the money from the bank, and after 90 days, they can directly pay the money to the bank. That means B goes to his bank, discounts and gets the money. B gets the money from A, and A's bank gets the money from B bank. Okay, B. So this is how it happens, accommodating. That means what is happening here? A is accommodating the need of B, B is accommodating the need of A. In this case, because both are friends, one person is accommodating the need of another person. So these type of bill of exchange, which are prepared in a friendly manner in order to sort out friendly help, is called as accommodating bill. That means there is no trade relation here. That is the only difference between a normal bill of exchange and an accommodation bill of exchange. Okay. This is just the journal entry. Here an example is given, like A accepted a bill for 20,000 drawn by B to enable the latter to raise funds at 3 months on 1st October. That means A accepted a bill for 20,000. B has the requirement of that money. Now B immediately what he did, he discounted it with his bank at 6% per annum. That means he will get an amount of 6% lesser than 20,000. On the due day, B remitted the amount to A, and A paid it to the bank. Now in B's book, what happens? B is the person who actually draws that bill. So A accepted it. That means A is the one who owes it. B is the one who has to receive it. So bills receivable, being bill drawn on A for 3 months. Okay. Bills receivable to A, 20,000. So what he does was bills receivable, because when a bill of exchange is drawn, it is a receivable because you will receive that money after 30 days or 60 days. Now immediately what he did was he discounted that bill of exchange. So simply this bill receivable account debit which you are showing will become credit here, and the amount which you get in your cash is 19,700, and 300 is the expense, interest expense or the discounting expense which the banker deducts. So it is an expense. Expense means P&L account. P&L account means debit. So this is debited. This is debited. And your cash account is debited because you are receiving the money from the bank. Cash means debit balance. Debit means addition. Debit what comes in, credit what goes out is your real account principle. Because money is coming in, you have to debit what comes in. So 19,700 you debit. This bills receivable you credit, because this and this will get knocked off because you no longer have a receivable, because you went to that bank and you got the money. That means there is no longer a receivable in your account because you have received that money. So this 20,000 and this 20,000 gets cancelled. Okay. And on the due day, A account to cash account, what happens is on the due day, you will pay this money to A. Sorry, A will give this money being the amount paid to A to meet the bill on due date. That means A has to pay to the bank, isn't it? Because this is just a friendly adjustment you have taken from A and A has accepted. So you have to pay this money to A. So on the due date, you have to pay this money to A. So you have to reduce your cash balance. That means cash is going out from your account. So if cash is going out, credit what goes out. So you are crediting your cash account by 20,000 and you are debiting A account by 20,000 because already you have credited A account. Now you have to knock it off. Otherwise, your book balance will still show that there is an amount of receivable from A. So hence you have to knock this off by passing an opposite entry while paying the cash. So this 20,000 will get knocked off with this entry. So A accounts become 0. Bills receivable account also becomes 0. Got it? So that is what you need to remember. Hope this is understood. So this is just a friendly adjustment which is passed, and the entries here also I have given example to you. Bills receivable are nothing but debit because it is an asset. You have to receive money, so it is an asset, so it has debit balances. So A account is something creditor. Creditor always has a credit balance. So A account has been credited in your first scenario. Okay, A account has been credited in your first scenario, and then you went to the bank, you got that money, this entry was passed, and on the due date you paid to A, so A's account has been knocked off. Okay, so that is what you have to pass the entries. Hope you understood. Same is the case on the opposite side. You can see A's journal here. So it's just the opposite entry. Here it is bills receivable, here it will be bills payable. Now because he has accepted that bill, he has to pay it to B. So we have to pay. That means payable is a liability. So liability means credit balance. So bills payable account 20,000 we are putting, and B account we are putting 20,000. Okay. And here, after when you have received money from B, what happens? You are receiving money. That means cash is coming into your account, means debit balance, debit what comes in. So you are debiting your cash account and you are knocking off B because you are showing B debit balance. So in order to cancel this, now you have to knock it off here as passing an opposite entry. So B gets knocked off here. Okay. Now the only thing remaining is bills payable account. So this bills payable account also should get knocked off when you actually pay the amount. So on the due date, you actually pay this amount to your bank. So this bills payable, the liability will now be knocked off by debiting it, and you have to pay to the bank in terms of cash. So cash gets credited, credit what goes out. Hope you understood the flow. Okay. All this knock-off entries should always be there, because once a liability is created, you post a liability entry. But once that, when that liability is settled, no longer there should be a liability which should be reflecting in your balance sheet. You have to pass the knock-off entries, else there will be an error in your balance sheet. So that is what we are trying to do here. Initially, when we accepted the bill, we are becoming a creditor. That means we have to pay to someone. We have to pay to B. So that's why we are creating a liability in terms of payable. And to whom we are liable? We are liable to B. That's why we have debited B. Okay. So the personal account, debit the receiver, credit the giver. So 20,000 we are debiting here B. And then when we receive the cash, we are adding up the cash balance by debiting cash. And who is paying you? B. B is paying you. So we have to knock off B's account, which we have already debited here. That's why we are simply crediting B account so that it gets knocked off. Okay. He is giving here in this case. And then the last one, when you are paying to the bank, the bills account is still showing balance. So when you are paying to the bank, your liability is over. There is no longer a liability. That means there should not be any credit balance. So you have to debit the credit balance. So this credit which you are showing here gets debited here, and the cash is going out from your account. So you will credit the cash. This is just the flow of transactions which you should remember in your mind. Initially it may be difficult, but once when you identify the flow of transactions, it becomes easy for you. Always think in terms of profit and loss and balance sheet, then it becomes easy for you, friends. Hope you understood this concept. There are two types of bills receivable book and bills payable book. Bills receivable book is nothing but, it is just a book which shows the total receivables which you have in terms of who is going to pay and who is, it will have this date of receipt, from whom, except date of bill, everything will be mentioned here. Same is the case with bills payable book. It is just the opposite. That means to whom we have to pay, when is the due date of the bill, everything is mentioned in the bills payable book. Nowadays, it is all in ERP software. So just by a click of button, we can get the entire accounts payable list, and at the same time, we can get the entire receivables list along with the due date, customer name, invoice date, when we have to pay, what is the mode of payment, everything is mentioned. So earlier they used to maintain a bills payable book and bills receivable book, but nowadays it is all ERP based, so there is no actual need to maintain such a books. It is all maintained in an electronic form. So the important terms which you need to remember: honoring. Honoring means you have to, when the due date comes, you have to honor that bill, you have to pay that bill. Dishonor means when you don't pay the bill. Discounting of bills means when you go to the bank and ask the bank to pay the immediately by accepting for a reduction in terms of interest. That means bank will deduct some amount and pay to you the balance. So this is called as discounting, because you are getting a lesser amount. So it is called as discounting of bills. Okay. And next is retirement of bills. When drawee pays the bill before the due date, it is called as retirement. So instead of 90 days, he pays at 60 days. Then the bill of exchange gets cancelled and it is called as retired. That means no longer the bill of exchange is valid, because the drawee has committed or has honored his commitment before the due date. Okay. Renewal of bill of exchange is a cancellation of old bill and preparation of a new period. That means when what happens is, sometimes we write 90 days in the bill of exchange. In the last day, the drawee comes and tells that I am not in a position to pay because of some health issue. So you extend this or you renew this bill by another 30 days. So if the drawer is okay with it, then what he does is renewal of bill. That means the old bill is cancelled, and in return of that, a new bill is prepared along with the interest. Because he is losing the interest also will be added, and then the new bill of exchange is accepted by the drawee once again. Accommodation of a bill is what I told you. is signed by a person as a guarantor, the accommodating party is liable for the bill. That means it is just same like a bill of exchange, but a friendly relation comes into play here. Okay, so that is the major difference between a normal bill of exchange and an accommodation bill of exchange. Notary public, common public law officer, in case of a dishonor of bill of exchange, it has to be notarized. Rebate is nothing but when a bill is paid by the drawee before due date, some allowance is given to him. That allowance is called as rebate. That means sometimes in the bill of exchange it is mentioned that the 90 days is the due date, but in case you pay it by 60 days, instead of 10,000 you can pay me 9,800. That 200 rupees is nothing but your rebate. Even those conditions are also mentioned in your bill of exchange. So in this chapter majorly we have seen bills of exchange and promissory notes. Hope you understood the difference between a bill of exchange and promissory note. Once again, a quick recap. Both form part of your Negotiable Instruments Act. Both are used in your company credit terms. That means between a buyer and seller, between the creditor and the debtor. The only difference between a bill of exchange and promissory note in terms of its application, that in case of bill of exchange, the creditor prepares it and the debtor accepts it. Whereas in a promissory note, the debtor himself prepares a promissory note and there is no requirement of acceptance. It is just the opposite of a bill of exchange. And some of the common conditions are: both should be in writing, both should be unconditional, both should have a legal currency, both should have a date mentioned in it, and both should be on a revenue paper, revenue stamp, and has a stamp paper in a stamp paper with a revenue stamp on it. So then only it becomes legally admissible. So this is what the major difference is about bill of exchange and promissory note. And we have also seen the journal entries related to a promissory note. It is very simple if you can understand in terms of profit and loss and balance sheet account. So with this we complete this chapter. When we deal with the same chapter in some other subject, you can refer to this video. And also in some other subjects we will be covering more into letters of credit as well. That is again a vast topic which we need to cover. It is similar to a bill of exchange but with some added plus or minuses. So that's all for today, friends. Please do watch the video and please take care of yourself. Stay safe and thank you for supporting, and do subscribe and share it. And please join our Telegram group. The link is given in the description and you can always ask any kind of doubts, no matter it is a small doubt or a big doubt. Doesn't matter. You can post your doubts in the Telegram group and I will be very much happy to answer it. Thank you. Stay safe.